to Waterloo,
And I have two people here, and very welcome. Mr. Jesse Beltram from California, Sacramento, and Lars Drudgaard, ours Denmark.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you.
Very welcome. Yeah, we're going to talk about all kind of technologies what is used by mind control. I think a lot of people who was hearing this for the first time, mind control, what is happening, what kind of technologies. I think first we're gonna explain and thinking something about that. Yes?
Sure.
Let's start with Jesse.
Yeah. Well, my name's Jesse Beltran. I'm a retired firefighter paramedic from California in the United States. I'm also the president of an organization called the International Center Against the Abuse of Covert Technologies. The reason the organization was developed is we had a interesting phenomenon that was happening in the United States where people were complaining about having non-consensual implants put in their body basically without their consent. And initially it was very, very hard to believe, and I wouldn't have believed it myself until I was exposed to the technology. But basically what ISAAC.org does is we help those victims provide evidence to prove what their claims are. And the reason we have to do that is because today what's typically happening in the United States is most of the victims, when they go to their physician, as everyone is taught to do, and they explain what they're experiencing, they immediately get diagnosed with a psychological disorder, as delusional or schizophrenia. The problem with this is that, unfortunately, these are actually victims of what we call domestic terrorism, and they're just being victimized again by the psychiatric community, and it's not the kind of help that they need. So what we do is we do testing, a 3-phase testing process, which involves the first phase is a preliminary radio frequency scan with a radio frequency detector called the JM20 Pro. And then phase 2 is we require that the participants who strongly believe that this is what is happening to them go out and help obtain medical images in the form of CT scans, MRI scans, or high digital panoramic x-rays. And finally, the third phase is why Lars and myself are here in Belgium, is phase 3. And phase 3 is doing the testing within a controlled environment, such as a Faraday cage. And what that does is it eliminates the feasibility that this is coming from an outside source, and really dials in and says that these human beings are emitting a radio frequency, and it is not normal for human beings to emit radio frequencies. As Dr. John Hall, who's on our board, states that human beings have the electromagnetic potential, but they do not emit radio frequencies, and so that's what our organization does. Lars, I head the United States. Lars is the regional director of the European territories, and I'll let Lars speak a little bit about how that came to be.
Okay, very welcome, Lars.
Thank you. Just like Jesse, I don't think I would completely have believed in these kinds of things and atrocities going on if I hadn't been exposed to it myself. It is so unbelievable that human beings will do this to other human beings. And the way we are brought up, we are just generally not accepting how much evil there is in the world. And to me it happened in 2009, and a while after that I got in contact with a couple of other European victims of this, and we formed an international Skype meeting. And that went on for a good year and became basically globally, and was a big success. And at one point, a bit over a year ago, Jesse Beltran came online and explained about this testing that he had uncovered in the United States by Dr. John Hall, and how the whole testing thing was going to be. And I was very interested, so I suggested if they could ship over equipment from the States, I would do the testing in Europe. And that's how we got started, basically, as an organization.
Yeah, so you have find each other,
Yeah.
and now you have find each other, and you can be stronger with one group also.
Yeah, and the thing is, in the United States, we've done testing. It covers basically 13 cities in the United States, and some interesting results in the statistics. What we're finding is those who are symptomatic, so those who come to us with complaints of symptoms, and we'll talk about what those symptoms may be, we're finding that around 83% of them are coming up positive on a preliminary scan for radio frequency emissions. Of that 83%, 60% are female. They tend to be isolated or widowed for whatever reason. And what we're finding is that there's another organization out there who did a national study, and they didn't do the radio frequency testing, but they just did surveys, and our results are matching what their survey results are. But we're doing a survey and we're including the radio frequency testing. And the other percentages happen to be male. Of those who are symptomatic, we're finding that 98% of them that came up positive have symptoms that they attribute to having auditory-like symptoms. So, speaking of having sounds that are transmitted that typically aren't there, and the thing was, this is hard to believe, and it sounds science fiction, but we've been able to obtain X-rays. We do have preliminary radio frequency scans. We have been able to, utilizing a Doppler ultrasound, actually record the frequency itself that's coming from the chip. And we do have some cases where they have been surgically removed. There was a politician out of Southern California whose name is David Larson, and he fell victim to this and ended up having several removed. And then we have another case of Bob Boyce, who was an inventor out of Georgia, who developed terminal cancer, and the only way he found out that he was microchipped is he was testing some of the equipment that he works on in what's called a Faraday cage, and he was using an RF detector similar to what we use when we go out and do the testing, and found that it was going off in the cage. He thought that it was a problem with the cage. They tested the cage, it was intact, and what they realized was is whenever it was put to his right shoulder, it would go off. And sure enough, they obtained an X-ray, and you could see a cylinder-shaped object. And at this time, he said to me, he says, "Jesse, I thought I was going to die. The cancer had spread all over his body." And they removed the microchip, and it was in the middle of a tumor. You can Google his name, Bob Boyce, and type in RFID, and you'll see the images of the tumors. And in the middle of the tumor is an RFID chip, and that was surgically removed. So that was removed from him, and his cancer went into remission. And about 6 months later, it came back very aggressively, only to be tested in the Faraday cage again, and the RF detector was going off, and they found a second RFID chip in him, and they had that removed. Now, this was done covertly against his consent, and this is typically the complaint among people who are having symptoms or fall victim to this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And maybe we have to mention that it's not uncommon to be microchipped, but usually it's people who do it with consent, either for the workplace, in the military, government, police, etc. And even famous people, royalties and so on, are all microchipped in case they get kidnapped, so they can be tracked. But there's the main difference is doing it without their consent, and some of the applications that these chips have beyond localization.
Yes, something about, I think we can be a little to the details. The chip, what you said, it's using frequency. It's coming out of the chip. Where is connected with the
Okay.
chips?
Well, there are two kinds of chips. Actually, there's a plethora of different types of chips out
Ah.
there. They come in various sizes. There's a standard chip that's a little bit larger than the size of a grain of rice that we see put in our animals, our dogs and cats. That's done very commonly. And then there are those that are size of the grain of rice.
Okay,
Yeah.
Lars is showing me a chip. Okay, it's like a rice.
Grain of rice. And it has a microprocessor in there. It has an antenna coil, a ferrite antenna coil,
Yeah.
and a circuit board. And there's two types. There's a passive type. The passive type has to be activated with a signal. So you send a signal to it, it turns on, and it'll send information, it'll transmit information. And then there's the type that are on 24/7. And again, these are little microcomputers, and they're sending and receiving information or data packets nonstop. So if you look at what we do with computers today, we listen to our music on bytes of information. So if you can imagine that, these microchips can do the same thing. So this is consistent, and this is why a lot of the victims do get the auditory symptoms that they complain about.
Okay, let's talk about in normal use for the chip. You also see the animals. They give him a chip so you can read all the details about the animal.
Yes. Usually the most known type is the one that people use in their pets, and that is a passive type. It only has a serial number that when it's directed with an energy beam, it transmits only a number back to identify the pet. And otherwise it's passive, it doesn't do anything unless it's activated with an outside source. But there are, especially farming, in a lot of where pets, or not pets, but where consumer animals are bred, they use a very, very sophisticated type of chip that sends back all kinds of biofeedback, heart rhythm, all kind of metabolism, all kinds of data on the animal, so they can basically remote monitor the health condition of those animals. And those are also being developed for humans at the moment. And they have been in use for many years for humans as well, because of astronauts and other people where it's critical. They have been used. But mainly those are fully capable, and these are not passive chips, these are active chips. They transmit either in a periodically, where they send out the information with some distance of time between them, or permanently.
Yeah, so we can say for normally use.
Yes.
In one way or another, but something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But now we are talking about something different, because the chips we're talking about use an outside source.
Yes.
Yeah. And what is the outside source?
That is a magnetic field. Basically, what they contain is the types, at least, that are like this, cylinder shaped in a glass ampule. They all contain a very, very thin thread of copper wire, and if you put a magnetic field that is strong enough into it, a pulse of a magnetic field, that will generate a current in the wire, and that will power it up.
Okay.
That's basic physics lessons from ordinary school, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
It interferes with the electromagnetic field from
Yes.
the Earth. Or?
No, that's a static field. It
Okay.
has to. It only works if the field is changing. So it has to be a transient in a change of magnetic field that is rapidly going on. That will induce a current in this wire, and that will power it.
so in other words, it has to be a man-made transmission, radio frequency that's admitted to these chips. That's one way that they get powered up. And most of these chips operate off of 1,000 watts. And the human body easily produces that. So the human body itself can be the battery for these, and this is why you have those that are what we call active chips that are on 24/7. Now here's the dangers to it. You know, we look at Bob Boyce's case, we look at the reports by Dr. Catherine Albrecht, who speaks out very openly and publicly against microchipping of animals because the studies show that they produce tumors.
Huh?
You know, they cause cancers. So if they cause cancers in animals, it's reasonable to say that they cause cancer and ill effects in human beings. If we look at in 2011, the World Health Organization, where before were denying that radio frequency emissions didn't cause any harm to human beings, but in 2011 classified radio frequency emissions as a class 3 carcinogen. So it's the data is out there, the knowledge is out there that this kills, and it's a slow kill in most cases. Now that's in simple terms, but if you look at what we're finding with victims, not only here in the United States and here in Europe, is that there are a lot of similarities. Now people are coming up positive on the preliminary scans at very focal anatomical positions on the body. So what I mean by that, it's not just random. It's coming at very specific locations, and for example, it would be the right and left, what we call the TMJ area, which is the jaw joint area, the base of the skull, the mid spine or mid thoracic, lower lumbar, right and left scapula area or your shoulder blade area, right and left shoulders, and for some reason in very, very young fit men we're finding emissions in the apex, which is the sternum near the heart. So those are what we're finding them. So you have to ask, why is it only in those locations? So we can take the study and put a red sticker on every location of those focal points that we find on people, superimpose them over each other, and they line up. It's not random. The only circumstances where we find a random finding is where someone has had an elective surgery. So if they had a surgery in their stomach, or a knee surgery, or a leg surgery, we were finding where they're coming up positive in those areas. They come up positive, and you ask them, well, did you have anything done there? And they say, well, yeah, how did you know? And,
that was one of my questions also, because I thought, okay, the astronaut and the animal, okay, something like the astronaut has his permission to take a chip in it,
Mhm.
but you are a victim, but you didn't give him permission. So how it's coming in your body?
Yes.
Correct.
And one of the things is what you said with surgery.
Surgery is one way, but there's a simpler way, and that's just by a simple injection. All you need is-
Vaccination?
All you need is a needle
Yeah.
to put these in. You have to ask yourself, well, how many different ways are we exposed to needles? I guess one would say that vaccinations is another way, and I believe everyone else goes to the dentist at some point in their life. So it's feasible to say that that's high probability how they get put into the jaw area. That's another way.
Okay, it is in the vaccination in the also you said by the dentist. Does the dentist or the chirurg knows that there are chips in it?
Mhm. Well, we do know, but because a lot of this is developed through research facilities and teaching institutions in the medical field. So we do know that there are some that absolutely 100% know that this is what's happening and this is what they're doing. I like to be, I'm a retired firefighter paramedic, like I stated, and I participated in blind studies. And what a blind study is you're testing out a product or a drug or some technique to see how effective it is. And in my case, it would be out in a pre-hospital setting. Now, I know 100% that all the professionals I work with believe in what they're doing, and they believe they're helping people for a good cause. Never would they ever imagine that they would be doing something that would be detrimental or harm a patient or a person. So that being said, there is a high probability that it could be done without the medical professional knowing what they're doing.
Huh.
Because this chip here is old technology.
Because it's so big.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it's the size of a grain of rice.
Yes.
But yeah, that's considered big. They now have technology where these things are down to the nano size. We're talking the size of a grain of sand. Now our hope is that we're finding victims who have been suffering the longest, so they have the older technology in them. Because if we're dealing with the chips or the technology that's the size of a grain of sand or smaller, Lord help us.
Huh.
And another thing is they are looking into biological electronics and organic electronics. So what these chips are made of is glass and metal and silicon, of course. But some of the research that is conducted at the moment is going into organic electronics, and that really makes it virtually impossible to trace it with any kind of imaging device.
Uh-huh.
So we need to expose this while the old technology like this is working. That's absolutely crucial. Because in the future it will not be possible.
Yeah. So your listeners know what that means when we're talking about organic technology. When we're talking about let's imagine taking a neuron, a brain cell, and growing it and interfacing it with an electronic circuitry. Okay, completely flesh type materials.
Yeah.
And when you do an MRI scan or a CT scan or an X-ray, they're not going to show up. And so Lars brings up a very, very important point there. And this is why it's so imperative that we continue doing what we're doing as quickly as possible and expose these cases where the old technology has been done against the individual's consent. Because if you look at what's being, the seeds that are being planted in today's media, they're talking about putting RFID chips on our children's clothing so they can be tracked at school and attendance. In the United States, the Obama bill, healthcare bill, in order to participate, they're talking about a class 3, a subdermal implantable device being utilized to obtain biometric data that has to be reported. So in order to participate, you're going to have a chip in you. Okay, it's there. They're talking about all these positive things, but they don't talk about the negative things. And what I'm about to say now is going to be hard for people to imagine, but if you just keep your mind open for a second, ask yourself, does the technology exist? You're going to have to say 100% absolutely. The other thing you're going to ask is why in the United States we have 20 states now who have bills against non-consensual implantation of an RFID device into a human being. Okay, it's because they know the technology is there, and they know that there's a large gaping hole where this technology can be abused.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they talk about the positive things about it, but let's talk about the negative things that they don't tell. What we find in our surveys, particularly because this tends to happen to women, higher incidence happening in women than it is men. Can you imagine what would happen if someone was to invade a woman's body against her consent? I think they call it rape. And if you look at the penalties for rape, they're pretty steep. I mean, in the United States, it's a felony, and you're going to go to prison. Now, imagine if you had an electronic device strategically placed on the human body, let's say the spinal cord, where you have nerve endings that go pretty much direct every part of our body. And you send an electrical stimulation to that, you can get people to contract the muscles, elicit pain, burning sensations. And what we're finding, particularly with Dr. Hall's book, and he speaks upon this, that a lot of the women, and his book is called The New Breed Satellite Terrorism in America, And what he says is that a lot of these women talk about sexual assaults. And Lars and I produced a video, and we called it Domestic Terrorism, Silent Rape, because this is a silent rape that's happening to women. And just imagine sending a remote signal and with the intent to cause harm and pain, let's say in the genitalia, because there are rare instances where it does happen to men. And imagine what it does, not only the physical torture that a woman would go through, but the psychological torture. Imagine, in the United States, if a woman is physically assaulted, particularly sexually, they gather the evidence, they have a team that's there, and they have a protocol. But what happens when a woman this is being done to her 24/7, 365 days a year? And imagine what it does to the psyche. She's crying out for help, but there are no resources out there. The only resources she gets is being thrown into the psychiatric community. And basically what you're doing is victimizing the victim again, like I stated earlier.
Yeah, we talk about shall we tell the listeners all kind of technologies what they're using? We said the nanotechnology we had, that the old one from the rice. What more do we have?
Well, in general, people would consider a device like this,
Yeah.
like
We know that from movies, you know.
Yes,
So
movies. So it's science fiction.
yeah.
It's considered science fiction, but in reality, this technology is very, very old. There's through the Freedom of Information Act in the United States, where people can elicit official government documents. The whole program of MKUltra, that was the mind control program that went on, and experimentation on interrogation and drugs and so on in the 60s and 50s and 60s. Through this, there is one MKUltra sub-project called 142, and that basically details experimentation with implants in animals, is what it says. But in that same, they're trying to do a new experiment, and that's going to be hush-hush, and it's going to be covered up, and so on and so forth in the document. But it ends up with saying, and these are very different than the implants we use for eavesdropping.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing is, this document was dated in 22nd of May 1962. 50 years old. They are 50 years old, at least.
So
Because the document from 62 references, they are different than the one we use already. So this is a 50-year-old technology, and people have to realize that they have been around, and we have a lot of unwitting spies running around in society who have an implant not knowing about it, that they might not even ever feel it, but they are basically being eavesdropped, and all conversations done with this person is listened in on.
can it also be that I have one device in me, but I don't yeah, it don't work.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Or it has to be activate or.
Well, the device, there are a lot of people who we do some control checks. We don't just test people who are symptomatic, who complain of this or believe they have been done it. For now and then we do a lot of people who don't suspect it, who don't think they are. Because it's important to show that not all come up positive. This is very specific, but now and then we do find them in people who have never had any complaint. And that is typically military people and other people. And what this is indicative is that they are tracked for some kind of purpose, but the chip doesn't influence them. They doesn't interfere with their life.
Yeah, and Lars brings up a good point. I was asked to do a presentation in front of a leadership group in a city south of Sacramento, and they had politicians there, religious leaders and business leaders. And they had saw our video that we had produced called Domestic Terrorism Silent Rape. And after we were done, they asked if we had the equipment, and they demanded that we scan them. What we anticipated finding was a very, very low positive finding. But what we did find was ultimately more disturbing with regards to the percentages versus the symptomatic group. And the reason why it was more disturbing is because out of that group, 90% came up positive. Now, let's analyze this particular group. When we started to pick it apart, those who were in the military came up positive in all the same identical locations, so you can superimpose them over each other, take photographs and superimpose them over each other and be exactly the same. The next group was groups that had elective surgeries. So they came up in an unusually abnormal area. So, we could take them out of the group as they've been counted. And what was left was generally these little old ladies, and they're only coming up positive in their right and left arm, or right or left arm. And then you ask them, well, what did you have done there? And they said, well, the only thing I've had done there is my flu vaccine.
Yeah. Come to you. Yeah. It's very easy, flu vaccine.
And they're in the United
And
States.
you
I
have
don't
a
know
lot
if
of
they are
people.
here. The United States has telephone campaigns, telemarketing campaigns right now to come and get your flu shot for free.
So.
I don't know what they do here in Europe, but they're very aggressive in the United States currently in getting these flu shots out.
It's about this time, here in Holland, because everybody got on the post from the doctor his card to go to take his vaccine. It's also on this moment here in Holland. So we're gonna broadcast this program next week, and also because of the flu vaccines from people.
Yeah, and we have done other interviews, and we've done some networking with some very credible people. And there was one radio show Lars and I had did in Ireland, and the name of the individual we were with on that show is skipping me right now. But he had documentation where a group of physicians had admitted that there were chips that were pre-filled in syringes in these flu vaccines. So this was his testimony, but you have to ask yourself, is this possible? If you look at the groups that we tested, and you have to say, okay, what are the odds of factoring everyone else out, the military, those who've had elective surgeries, and all you have left are people coming up positive in their right or left shoulder area? That's where you get your shots. You have to use common sense and say, is this possible? And I think most people would conclude absolutely. So this particular testing that we did of non-symptomatic group, we also did because we were so concerned about it. We went to one of the larger cities in California, in Sacramento, and we just took a whole bunch of just random people and started testing them, and the statistics were exactly the same.
Okay, now the big question: why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Well, I would say there's a little discrepancy between the United States and Europe. We are finding lower percentage in Europe, but still high. So we're a little bit behind schedule, according to whoever's doing this. But that, in general, that's how it goes. We're always 10 years behind the United States.
Yeah, normally. Yes. But
well, and
what do you think? Why? Yeah, we call it mind control.
Well, What if you look at where this was initially being tested? This was initially being tested in psychiatric facilities, and we know through the white papers, the funding in the United States, it was being tested in the prison systems. So if you can imagine strategically putting these remote tasers in people, well, what's the benefit in putting these in prisoners that way? I guess it's for
Yeah, you can
control.
control them. Yeah.
And I just want to point out that this is not recently. This was done in the very early 70s, where they were using technology from the 60s to do that on the prison population.
Yeah, it's okay. The news is coming out today, but it's very old.
Yeah.
From the
And that was actually under Ronald Reagan. They proposed it in 1973 when he was still a governor in, I think it was California, wasn't it? Yeah. He proposed the prison of Vacaville for people, prisoners to have those implants done. And so if they got away, they could be pacified instantly, and they could be tracked and picked up just by, sending the car, pick them up. Or they can, if they become violent, etc., inside the prison system, they could directly control the nervous system and the brain functions of the people. So that was shown and proposed as a proposal to do this. It was caused public outcry. So this was public knowledge in the area in 1973, and it was closed down. Later references have shown that it was carried out. So it was not. It was just the politician claimed we closed it down, and to calm down the public outcry. But they did continue doing it. And also, what is strange is in the 70s, this all got classified and all got black. So today, there's complete amnesia that this stuff was actually known and out in the public domain in the 70s.
yeah, but we have almost a new president, but we have Obama. Is because in my thinking, it's military technology. Does the president knows about it?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
President Obama put together a panel of experts called the Presidential Bioethics Commission. Amy Gutman is the president of this commission, and they were put together to investigate whether or not non-consensual experimentation was still happening to American citizens to this day. And more specifically, it was the Tuskegee experiments, and what that was about is they were injecting males with syphilis and then allowing them to spread the disease unchecked through women, and just to see how it would spread and what the outcome would be to the victims. Okay. So this commission was put together and was supposed to investigate whether or not this was happening. In Washington, D.C., at one of their early meetings, we had 300 victims show up to speak.
On this other technology.
Yeah.
Not on syphilis.
Yeah, not on the syphilis, but about the technology we're talking about. So that's a good point to bring up to clarify for your listeners. They gave testimony, and then every subsequent meeting, they censored. They didn't allow the victims to speak anymore. In February 3rd of 2012, of 2011. They had a meeting in San Francisco, California, and me as representing ISAC, I attended that meeting. And the things that they were saying was rather disturbing. They're wanting to get rid of confidentiality, HIPAA laws that are in the United States, and their agenda is to turn the entire globe into a human lab. Mm-hmm. So they're talking about things like testing anthrax on pediatrics. So So you have to ask yourself, okay, anthrax vaccine, so you give an anthrax vaccine to a ped, how do you test if it works?
Yeah.
You have to expose them to it. The other things that they're doing is they're trying to obtain copyrights and patents on every human genome on this planet, okay? And so if they obtain copyrights and patents on that information, then the dilemma is who owns you,
It is unbelievable.
okay?
It's nature and they want to patent it.
Correct. They want to own you.
Huh.
So I asked a question, and they allowed me to ask a question if I wrote it down on a card. And the question I wrote is, I understand the importance of your experimentation, but I asked, what safeguards do you put aside for the victims when things go wrong? And the case that I presented to them was the Bob Boyce case, where he obtained terminal cancer with regards to the implants. And they accepted the question. I was the only one to submit a question, and they said they would read it. And when they came to read the question, it wasn't my question. They completely censored mine and wrote their own. And this was televised worldwide, because you could see me handing over the card, and completely asked a different question. And I have a witness to this because I have horrible handwriting. And I had the person who was with me dictate and write it. And she has the question still written down in the pad and dated that she wrote. So here's where we're at with things with the Presidential Bioethics Commission. They were supposed to give their findings January of 2012. For whatever reason, they decided to postpone it until after this next election.
Huh.
And I would actually like to make a comment to bring this home to Europe. And right now, in Europe, there are very evil forces out there trying to propose that any human being who is rendered unconscious can be a legal test subject.
Huh.
So that means if you are found unconscious in a car accident or whatever, you just fall over unconscious, then you are legally can become a test subject. You could be implanted, you could be, anything can be done to you. But that has to be seen in how easy it is to render people unconscious. You can actually do it just with radio waves, microwaves, light waves. You can render people unconscious so easy. So this is basically just saying we can do it, make anyone a test subject of anything we like. We basically just need to render them unconscious for a moment, and that's it.
Okay.
And this is actually in Europe, in progress. And I know there are groups out there protesting it, and I think that it's worthwhile raising the issue while we're here in Brussels.
Yeah, that's why we can talk about why you are here this weekend.
Mhm.
But first, I want to know about the attacks.
Yeah.
Because I know Melanie, she said van yeah, but they can attack me. What's happening when someone is when you have an attack, when something that's out of your body tries to interfere with your body? What's happening?
Well, I think if you go to our website at www.icaact.org, you can look at the video that was produced by Lars for ICAACT. And it was an exclusive interview with Dr. Barry Trower, and it's called 30-Minute Update. And in that video, he explains what exposure to radio frequency can do to a person. And he talks about it specifically manipulates people in very negative ways. You can cause depression, suicide. You can cause irregular heartbeats. He mentions a bunch of different anomalies. He mentions a specific case where the United States consulted him when the special forces returned from Afghanistan, and there was 5 wives that were beaten, and some of them were killed by these soldiers. And the United States asked Trower, what frequencies cause this aggression. And he says, don't tell me, I'll tell you. And what had happened is subsequently those soldiers were being accidentally exposed to these radio frequencies, and it was entraining their brains to violence and being very aggressive. Now, if you look at what's happening across the globe, these new communication systems are being implemented everywhere, and Trower predicted what the end results would be, and more specifically would be increased aggression amongst law enforcement. And I don't have to say much there. You know, it's out there in the media. That's exactly what's happening.
Maybe you just have to clarify who Dr. Barry Trower is.
Mm-hmm.
He's a former British military microwave weapons expert and a former British agent who interrogated foreign spies, etc., on this technology issues.
Interesting guy.
Yes. So he does have a lot of knowledge on the technology, how it's used, and what it's capable of. So it's
Yeah. Yeah. Well, before we take this interview, yes, you told me you all, in the last few weeks you also lost 5 people about this through this technology.
Well, typically what happens is because there are no resources out there, and what I mean by that, there is no help.
Mhm.
There is no group or clinic or hospital that you can go to that can help you with this and has a treatment and a solution to stop the torture. So what happens is a lot of people will end up giving up and committing suicide.
Mm.
And in some cases, I think most recently, there was a gentleman, he is a bioengineer major or electrical engineer major. Along that line, he's a very highly intelligent individual, and he came to Europe and he...
Well, Sean?
Sean,
Yeah,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And he did an interview about his experience being a victim. And part of that, in that interview, he talked about how utilizing this technology through radio frequencies, that they're able to cause cardiac arrhythmias, so irregular heartbeats. And if you do it at a perfect time, what you can do is cause the heart to go into cardiac arrest. After he did that interview, after returning to the States, approximately 4 weeks later, he died in his apartment of a heart attack. He was only 44 years old.
So,
And most of these victims are in their 40s that are succumbing to this.
yeah.
Well, that's also a lot of unfortunate suicides, as you mentioned. But the rate of suicide, that's a part of the, let's say, from going covert to overt with the technology. Usually one part of the system of that is to force the victim to commit suicide. It's basically becomes torture to a degree where they force people to it, and there's nothing the victim can do. If you complain about it, you will get institutionalized, dropped, or fried to oblivion. So they will have their way either way. So if you go public and say anything about it, you will be fried, have your brain fried, or being dropped in a mental institution somewhere. If you go secretly, they will do it. So,
Yeah.
and that's what also one of the things, you know, a lot of people have them covert. They will never affect their lives, but at some point they can be activated to basically eliminate people.
It's something like
And that's-
you always be in a state of fear.
Yeah.
Huh.
And there's actually a lot of cases especially to signal intelligence, the NSA and the British, where there's a lot of spontaneous suicides. People all of a sudden say they hear voices and then they commit suicide instantly.
Yeah, and Trower speaks on this too, and he says what scientists would call a success is to methodically and utilizing a protocol in a very organized fashion against someone, and getting them institutionalized or labeled as crazy, that was a successful outcome.
Huh.
And Trower testified to this, and he's, you know, what's great about Trower, he's a patriot for humanity right now, and as far as I'm concerned, he's a hero, because he's coming out and he's telling the truth. The other thing that, with regards to that, he also says that scientists today are getting away with what scientists during World War II, what they were doing, they got hung for.
Hmm.
And that was the Nuremberg trials.
Yeah, but when I talked with Melanie, we talk about the vaccinations, and but she also told me from they spread it out, the nanotechnology with the chemtrails.
Well, what we don't know yet is whether or not these are separate experiments that are trying to be covered up with some other technology. We don't know if it's the actual technology. We know it's different types of experiments that are going on because they're most definitely artificial in both cases.
Yeah.
But we don't know if one technology is used to cover up other experimentations or if it's the technology also is capable of anything.
Yeah. But more specifically, it's not something that we're tackling right now. What we're tackling is about finding objective evidence, objective data,
Yeah.
so that victims have something tangible, something you can see, touch, feel, hear, and be able to present it to the professionals, so where they can't turn their backs, and then that's where we're at. That's
Yeah.
what-
That's maybe also the point where we want to go to why you are here this weekend. Eh?
Yeah.
And can you say something about what you're gonna do this weekend?
Yeah, well, we talked about the different phases that ICE Act is involved in. What we've done this weekend is we've had victims that have come up positive in previous scannings from the United States, London, Spain, here in Belgium.
Yeah, from all over the world, eh?
Sweden, all over. We're actually putting them through phase 3, which we're doing the testing in an isolated environment, so where we can narrow down, and say without a doubt that this is coming from the human body, and we always try to be the devil's advocate, because in the preliminary scan you can always say we live in a wireless environment and there's a lot of radio frequency pollution. Although we minimize that in our preliminary scan by calibrating the scanners down to where you have to really be on top of the emission most of the time in order for it to come up positive. So what this phase 3 does is basically helps prove a reasonable doubt that these are the findings and this is a controlled environment, and it's in your face now. The other thing that helps them, for those victims who maybe didn't have anything show up in a medical image, such as an MRI, CT scan, or an X-ray, if they come up positive in the preliminary scan and come up positive in those locations in the controlled environment, you can then say, okay, this is outside the realm of medicine because this is about technology, and most physicians aren't taught about these things in medical school, and I can give a prime example. I had dinner with the chief radiologist from the Sutter Hospital System in Sacramento, California, and we showed him the evidence that I showed you earlier, and when he looked at it, his jaw dropped open, and he says, we're not taught about this in medical school. I would have read this as a normal MRI scan. He goes, but now I have to rethink everything. And whenever someone comes to me with the complaints that you talk about, I have to consider that this is a possibility. Okay, so this is some of the things that we do to create a positive outcome for those victims so they get help and resources and hopefully don't get put into the system with psychological diagnoses or those who have been diagnosed and put into the system that this is a way to say, look, you should have looked at something else first besides just jumping to a psychological diagnosis and taking the easy way out.
It is 1 for 12, eh? Because what you said from, because if we can't prove it now,
Yeah. Well,
we can't prove it in the future, and then we were first up behind.
I unfortunately have a very bad case from Denmark. It's about 1 month old and to 14 days old, basically, where a Danish victim was scanned by ISAC, came up positive, and then felt comfortable to go to the police, or the family felt that they were comfortable enough to go to the police, and they did not want to look at the scanning. They did not want to speak to me or anyone else. They thought this, okay, if you complain of these complaints types, we have a protocol. So we will call in a psychiatrist. And they did that. Again, the psychiatrist does not want to listen to other people, investigate the claims, if there's any basis to it. And he was committed against his will. And even there, when he was given sessions with a psychiatrist, he basically, the psychiatrist claimed out, directly, well, these are the complaints you made. I have to diagnose you like this and this. I don't believe you, and I don't have time to investigate it, whether or not you're telling the truth. And then this is the case. They have 10 minutes to decide on people's lives without investigating whether or not they're claimed to.
And we know this is fact because he took our advice and used an application that allowed him to record it and retransmit that recording to a remote location so someone else can have that evidence in case he gets further victimized with drugs and gets to a comatose state where he can't plead for himself. So that's why we know that to be factual. The other interesting thing, and I'll let Lars touch on that, is this particular facility has been known and associated with a company that works on a specific drug for a specific purpose, and I'll let Lars elaborate on that.
Well, the company is generally one of the biggest medical companies in Denmark. They do a lot of different types of drug, but the most notorious one is the one that is used for executive action style things in the
Execution for euthanasia.
Yes.
For euthanasia.
Yeah, that's the drug, the company. This facility is very closely linked with this drug company, a pharmaceutical company. They're doing a lot of tests with them. And we found that, of course, very scary. Then the company with that name and reputation. And then doing... But you have to realize most of those psychiatric are basically research facilities. They are very, very closely linked. But just to take it on a positive note, I just want to end this on a positive note.
Yeah.
Last week we have received requests from medical doctors who have patients complaining of this, actually investigating and asking us, can we see some evidence? Could you help us in directing us towards whether or not I can prove this is right or wrong before I make up my mind? And that's where we want to go. That's what is really needed, and that is very, very encouraging. I think.
Yeah, give us. We've had Lars representing ISA Act, did a presentation in Denmark at the Open Your Mind conference. Dr. Barry Trower was there. Other leading nanotechnologists, biologists, and other experts in cane was also there. It was received so well that, and again, this is to the general population. There were victims there, but it's being received as credible. This is factual, and we're giving the actual incidents of the cases and the programs and the documentation that this is this exists. So this month, here in October, Lars has been asked to do another presentation in Norway. And what's great about this particular case is that he'll be doing the presentation in front of physicians, psychologists, NLP experts, and some of those are from the United States. So it's a huge opportunity.
Yes.
Spread
Yeah,
that.
because we need the critical mass also in scientists.
Mhm.
So from, hey, what's happening? And that group has to be growing.
But
And then,
we first of all need those few physicians who are willing to investigate
yes.
those claims,
Okay, yeah.
hopefully to prove the claims and bring that forward in the medical and psychiatric community, that this is going on and investigation needs to happen every time.
And this is huge because typically, I don't think there's been any other organization out there that has been successful to get this opportunity to be in front of the professionals that were saying, look, you need to take a look at things differently. You can't just jump to a psychological diagnosis, and that's psychiatry. And I would challenge any psychologist to this. You know, show me a blood test, show me any objective finding that says you can prove that someone is delusional or is schizophrenic, because there isn't any test out there. There is no EKG, there is no EEG, there's nothing out there. I'd like to weigh that up against what we're producing, objective findings in the form of video, or our statistics, and we're moving into phase 3, and we have certain cases where we're actually having a surgical removal. So I put that up against their psychological diagnosis any day, hands down.
Have I forgotten to ask you one question? Was that's very important. The listeners has to know.
What do we need to do? What does society need to do? Basically, we need to wake up. Everyone needs to band together, and not just in Europe. I'm talking globally, because this is a global phenomenon that's happening. And if you look at what the end result's here, if we do nothing and we lose our rights, our freedoms, and we're delving into an arena where the last freedom that you identify as being as human being is starting to be taken away and chipped at, and that's your thoughts. Now, when that's taken away, and that's put in shackles, and that's in handcuffs, what are you? You're nothing but a slave. So if this is the future that you want for your loved ones, your children, your children's children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, then keep doing what you're doing. But if you don't want that future, you need to wake up, and you need to band together, and we need to make sure that we're bringing this to the media, to the general population, to your ministers, to everyone. And we need to do something yesterday, not today.
Okay. And I hope this broadcasting will help you also with that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
And I wish you a lot of success with all the things. Bye-bye.
To Waterloo, Poitiers, and then in June, the roses wore the 100 years through battlefields of blood and tears, from Bosworth Field to Point du Hoc, Stalingrad and the siege of York. The bloody turf of Gallipoli had no effect on the killing spree. Bannockburn to Austerlitz, the fall of France and the German Blitz, the coolest of atrocities. Europa's blood is born of these. They're just save for life and death and hate, emerging from the new caliphate. The victimism is what I fear. Will move than